Hey, after Dad passes away, is it okay if I move back home? My SIL calmly made this unexpected statement. She had indeed moved back home after her third divorce. She was a troublesome returnee daughter who neither paid for any living expenses nor did any housework. If this situation continues, our position as a couple will be jeopardized. We must take measures. That's when an idea came to me. I, Mina, am 38 years old, running a pastry shop with my husband in a provincial city. The shop has been loved by locals for 40 years and was managed by my father-in-law. We got married when my husband, Duke, was 30 and I was 28. Being a regular at the pastry shop, I was liked by both my husband and my father-in-law. Duke's sister, Betty, moved back home after 2 divorces, but left 2 years ago when she got married for the third time. Her father had strongly opposed this marriage, as it was a scandalous affair that was frowned upon socially. You stole someone else's husband, so you must stay with him for life. Even if you come back, I won't welcome you home. Though he forgave her, he made it clear that she must take responsibility, and Betty never returned home again. Then, my father-in-law was discovered to be suffering from pancreatic cancer. The disease was quite advanced, and the doctors said he did not have long to live. Understanding the situation, he called his son and his daughter, along with me, his daughter-in-law, to his hospital room. Duke, I'm leaving the shop to you. You can run it as you wish. Work together with Nina and make it work. My husband nodded repeatedly and, holding his father's hand, replied, "Don't worry, leave it to me. Betty, it's been a long time. I'm sorry for what I said last time. It was almost like disowning you. If you're happy, that's all that matters. Stop by the house sometimes." It seemed that he was still fond of his daughter. She replied with teary eyes, "Understood, Dad." However, as soon as she left the hospital room, she calmly said, "Hey, after Dad passes away, is it okay if I move back home?" What? My husband, Duke, and I were shocked, and we couldn't immediately understand the meaning of her words. Actually, I broke up with him last month. He was having an affair with a woman 10 years younger than him, and I was so angry I got back at him. It was all his fault, but he made such a fuss about it. I couldn't take it anymore. That's how she reported her third divorce. It's hard to pay the rent for my current apartment by myself, so this came at a good time. She seemed to think it was appropriate to move back home now that her father wouldn't be around much longer. I couldn't believe it. "Let me know when the time comes." Leaving those words behind, she left the hospital. We were in a daze, unable to find words to respond, and just stood blankly in the hospital corridor for a while. Betty had first married at 25, and she had already left home when I got married into the family. But she returned after divorcing 2 years later. She remarried at 30, but her mother suddenly died of a stroke. And during those difficult times, she quickly filed for marriage and left again. 3 years later, she divorced again. Her third marriage, which started with an affair, ended in just a year. Altogether, her marriages didn't even last 5 years, and honestly, I can't understand her way of thinking. She was a type I had never encountered before, and we could never get along. I hate to say this, but I just can't bring myself to like your sister. When I conveyed this, Duke sighed along, "Indeed. She's my sister, but I can't bring myself to like her either. She's been self-centered since childhood, and as an adult, she hasn't changed. She grabs whatever she wants by any means necessary and discards it as soon as she's bored. She lacks compassion. Just imagining living together with her again made my spirits sink." My father-in-law passed away 10 days later. He was a beloved local shop owner and a friendly figure who also served as a community leader. So many people attended his funeral. Naturally, Betty was there too, but she didn't help with anything, eating the food as if she were a stranger. The pastry shop established by my father-in-law focused on traditional cakes with a local twist. Delicious but not very popular among younger crowds. My husband, Duke, graduated from a school specialized in pastry and often clashed with his father about wanting to utilize his training in France to develop new products aimed at younger customers. Looking back, though, those were fun times. In our area, a car is essential, and the parking lot at the shop was extensive. Duke's idea was to use a corner of it for an expansion of the shop and to set up an eat-in area. The second floor of the shop served as living space for us, Duke's parents, and occasionally Betty, who returned now and then. On the first anniversary of my father-in-law's passing, only close family gathered on the second floor of the shop. Even on that day, Betty didn't help out and was cheerfully chatting with uncles and cousins. Aunts and cousins who knew her well said her reputation was very low. Regardless of whether they are relatives or not, she's very friendly to men, everyone agreed. The thought of living with her was daunting, but we hadn't told the relatives about her third divorce or her plans to move back home yet. Nothing was decided, and we wanted to avoid any issues at the first anniversary. However, living together with her started sooner than expected. Betty came for the first anniversary and immediately settled in the family home. The room our parents used is empty, right? I'll be using that one. The moving truck is coming tomorrow, so help me out, she declared. I had never been so surprised. It seemed she had planned to live with us from the start, intending to take over their parents' spacious room instead of her old, smaller one. Although Duke expressed his dissatisfaction, the volume of belongings that arrived the next day wouldn't fit in the small room, and we had no choice but to move them into the larger one. From that day on, she lived a carefree life. She slept until the afternoon, freely took food from the fridge to have lunch, spent the afternoon in her room using her smartphone or watching TV, occasionally went shopping, and bought cosmetics and clothes. Cooking for 2 or 3 doesn't change the effort required. Please prepare my portion too, she said, naturally expecting me to prepare dinner. Duke and I endured the first week, but feeling the need to change the situation, Duke was the first to bring it up. Betty, aren't you going to work? Helping out in our shop would be fine, but if you're going to live here, you need to contribute something. If you don't want to work, do the household chores. She laughed loudly and replied, No way. I want to be exempt from living expenses and household chores. Duke, you received a lot of inheritance, right? The shop is yours, so you should at least cover my living expenses. Her brazenness had its limits. I was beginning to feel that no words would have any effect on her. Duke could only sigh and respond with a resigned, okay. Then one day, Duke came to me somewhat excited. Nina, I got a call from that bar. They're reopening today. Moonlight, it's been over a month, hasn't it? Shall we go tomorrow? Moonlight is a speakeasy-style bar located just a 5-minute walk from our house. It's more of a literal hideaway than just speakeasy style. A small gate features a modestly affixed sign with Moonlight engraved on a 2-inch square metal plate, making it look like just an ordinary house at first glance. The bar has only 7 counter seats, with dim lighting, and while it doesn't offer proper meals, it serves a variety of delicious alcohols, prosciutto, and cheeses. The owner is a man whose age is hard to guess, likely between 25 and 35 years old. He wears slightly tinted round glasses, sports a beard, and has slicked back hair fixed with hair gel, all of which contribute to his humorous and unique ambience. Previously, the bar was managed by an elderly gentleman over 70 with no relatives. But after his death, the current owner took over the management under the condition of handling the transition. This transition occurred about 5 years ago. New customers rarely notice this bar, and it's not a place people just stumble upon, but those in the know keep it bustling with a few regulars during open hours. However, the owner is whimsical. There are no fixed off days or business hours, and he often takes sudden, long vacations, closing the shop for extended periods. When closing for a long time or reopening, notifications are sent via email at the request of regular customers. So, we decided to visit Moonlight for a drink immediately. Hey, long time no see. Where have you been? I was in Bolivia for a bit. South America, right? Yes, it's a country surrounded by the Andes and famous for the Unisalt Flats. After a brief chat about Bolivia, the owner asked, Have you both been well? It seems like you might be a bit stressed. With no other customers around, we inadvertently vented about Betty. That sounds tough. The owner was a good listener and seemed genuinely interested. As the conversation wound down, Duke sighed and said, I guess the only solution is for her to find a new boyfriend and move out. Huh? But Betty hardly ever goes out, and she's already 35. It's hard to imagine her finding a boyfriend. Even though it felt harsh, I couldn't help but say it out loud. If Nina says that, it must be serious. I might have an idea. As the owner spoke, we leaned in eagerly. What? Do you have a good idea? As the conversation continued, we discussed a proposal from the owner. It seemed Duke was seriously considering taking action against his sister. If Duke agrees, I have no objections. Just as planned, on the next day off for the pastry shop. In the afternoon, the owner visited our home. When we opened the front door, we couldn't believe he was the same person we knew. His previous slicked back hair had changed to a more natural flowing hairstyle. Without glasses and having shaved his beard, he looked quite handsome. I was much younger when I took over the bar, so I was a bit disguised. The owner explained. His tinted glasses turned out to have no prescription. But it's becoming a hassle, and I thought I might stop using the disguise with this opportunity. It's perfect timing. Saying that, he laughed brightly. I thought he was clearly an eccentric character. However, I felt certain that Betty would definitely show interest in him. Yet, despite it being past noon, she still hadn't gotten up. As soon as the owner graciously greeted us with "Thank you for having me today," she appeared. Oh, do we have a guest? Excuse me for looking like this. She was in very revealing house clothes, arching her back and pushing her chest forward. I really disliked her behavior like this. As I told you yesterday, we have a guest coming over for lunch today. What? Really? She hadn't been listening to my words at all. May I join you? She asked the owner in a coquettish manner, which annoyed me. But this was all part of today's plan. She went back to her room, changed her clothes, and came back after meticulously doing her makeup. She still wore a top with a deep neckline, emphasizing her cleavage. I run a bar nearby, but I was overseas for about a month, so I've been missing American home cooking. I heard that Nina was preparing a meal, so I'm sorry for imposing. The owner introduced himself with the clean and youthful demeanor of a young man. I had no idea there was such a bar around here, she expressed surprise, but we had kept it a secret, wanting to protect our couple's hideaway. He requested roast beef, cream stew, and potato salad. I've been craving these. These are truly wonderful. He said this and joyfully ate my cooking. Is this okay? If you have any requests, I can cook anytime. As she said this, I thought it might have been bad to serve such a simple meal, but Duke and I nodded to each other, happy that the first stage of our plan had been successful. From that night on, Betty started frequenting Moonlight regularly. Today, I'm going to the movies with the owner, she'd say cheerily as she headed out. I was worried that the owner might find her bothersome, but he seemed to be enjoying himself. Indeed, he was a bit of an eccentric character. 2 weeks later, we received an email from the owner saying, I'm going to implement the final phase now. We hurried out of the house and headed to Moonlight. When we entered the bar, there was a man sitting deep behind the counter. He was a gentle person whom we had spoken to several times at this place, and he was nearly 6'5" tall. It was Mr. Rogers, who runs a small construction company. Betty sat down, leaving 2 empty seats between us, and the moment she saw us, she clearly looked annoyed. Probably, Mr. Rogers sitting further down was also an unwelcome presence for her. Hey, when is our next date? She asked cheerfully across the counter. A date? Did I make such a promise? The owner replied deliberately while placing a drink on a coaster. Oh, you're terrible, she cooed, almost unbelievably sweet. I just accompanied you because I didn't want to go to the movie alone. I wanted to see that film too, he responded expressionlessly. Betty was clearly shocked by his response. That's cruel. We're dating, aren't we? She exclaimed, typical of her. She often seemed to think that everyone adored her. That's troubling. You thought that? You remind me of my mother, so I kind of went along with it out of a sense of gratitude toward her. Something like that? The owner replied. Duke and I had a hard time holding back our laughter. Come on, that's not possible. How old do you think I am? It's impossible for me to have such a grown-up son. After taking this significant blow, the owner delivered another strike. However, you are over 50, right? Since I'm 28, a parent-child relationship seems more natural than that of lovers. The owner was clearly jesting, fully aware of her real age, which we had communicated to him. I'm only 35 years old. Why would you think I could be your mother? She seemed genuinely upset, but then she quickly moved next to Mr. Rogers, asking in a coquettish voice, Do I really look that old? Confirming target change. The owner said quietly. Duke gave a small fist pump and responded with, Understood, while I struggled to contain my laughter. Mr. Rogers earnestly replied to her, No, you look young. I have seen you here a few times and always thought you were beautiful, which pleased her. You seem very reliable. I like men like you. Betty said this and pressed her ample chest against Mr. Rogers' strong arms. Mr. Rogers also replied, I also prefer women like you, as he wrapped his arm around her waist. After a slightly uncomfortable scene unfolded, the two left the bar closely together. Betty did not return home that night. When she returned the next morning, she said, I couldn't sleep all night. I'm so tired. Haha. And shamelessly continued her words before disappearing into her room. Afterwards, she began to spend many nights out. And a month later, she hardly returned home at all. It was safe to say the plan had worked brilliantly. We met with the owner at Moonlight to discuss how things had unfolded. But Mr. Rogers seems like a nice guy, and I kind of feel bad. Are you sure it's okay? I was feeling a bit guilty as if we had pushed her onto Mr. Rogers. No worries. We chose carefully. Mr. Rogers is so passionate that his previous wife ran away, so he should get along well with her. I see. Duke listened to the conversation and smirked wryly. While I was glad Betty had moved out, I was also enviously reflecting on their budding relationship, leaving me with mixed feelings. Sensing this, the owner gently spoke up. Mr. Rogers is truly a wonderful person, but he does have some issues. The owner's words were laden with meaning. One day, Betty, buoyant in her steps, announced, I've really enjoyed the hospitality. As soon as the legal remarriage waiting period is over, I plan to get married right away. So, goodbye. And she started to leave the room. Duke stopped her with a warning. He can be very jealous, you know. He's always had a fierce temper whenever he sees a woman being friendly with another man, far more intense than you'd expect from his size. Even a light touch can turn into a big problem, so be careful. Really? I didn't know that. Her complexion changed instantly. However, as long as you don't cheat on him, he's really kind, so you don't need to worry. I spoke with a calm smile, but the owner had mentioned that Mr. Rogers' possessiveness was quite severe. I couldn't imagine how long she, who loves her freedom, could tolerate such strictness. Still, that was strictly their personal issue to handle. I also have some happy news to share. After years of fertility treatments, I've finally conceived and am now in a stable period. Next spring, I'll be having twins. I revealed it with a mix of irony and excitement. At my comment, her eyes widened in disbelief. Yes, that's right. So even if you come back, there won't be a place for you here anymore. Duke told her calmly, and her expression drastically changed, visibly shaken. You really don't need to worry. Mr. Rogers has promised that he won't let you come back here again. Duke added, trying to reassure her, but there was one important fact we hadn't yet disclosed. It concerned Mr. Rogers' mother. Her potential mother-in-law is known for her strict personality. We kept this fact a secret because revealing it might lead her to reconsider the marriage altogether. However, further conversations with the owner revealed that the relationship between Betty and her mother-in-law was indeed not going well. I don't want to live with my mother-in-law anymore, she complained and added, I want to live just by ourselves. But Mr. Rogers isn't listening to her pleas. But I try to meet your demands at night, so there should be no problem, he said with a laugh. Hearing this, I felt a chill somewhere deep inside. People are diverse, and so are the dynamics of each couple's relationship. Despite the deep concerns about whether their marriage would truly work out, this resolution promised to finally free us from being troubled by her presence. What lies ahead for us is the new challenge of raising the twins soon to arrive. This challenge will undoubtedly bring many difficulties, but my husband and I are filled with hope for the future. After the birth, I'll need to focus on breastfeeding for a while, so I'll have to avoid alcohol, I mentioned, contemplating the future during a visit to Moonlight. When I spoke regretfully about it, the owner of the bar reassured us. Don't worry, I have a variety of delicious non-alcoholic cocktails prepared, so I look forward to welcoming you here anytime. Also, if there's anything else I can help with, please let me know, he said, and together we raised a toast. Let's give it our all for our children to come, my husband declared with a new resolution. He then began to reveal recipes he had kept secret out of deference to his father, and embarked on developing a new menu. Some of the dishes he created were particularly appealing to the younger crowd, both in taste and appearance, making for stylish and photogenic cakes that did well on social media. They quickly became popular items, drawing long lines of people eager to purchase them. The owner of Moonlight also showed interest in trying out these cakes at his bar and made a special request for a cake infused with enough alcohol to get tipsy from eating it, truly highlighting his unconventional nature. Even if there was a possibility that my sister-in-law might return, my husband and I vowed to firmly refuse her re-entry because we now have a new family to protect and cherish. My name is Cindy. I am 47 years old and I work from home. I was relieved this year when my son, Greg, graduated from university and secured a job at a major company. After Greg moved out to start his own life, my mother-in-law suddenly called me into the living room. She said, "Cindy, your role here is finished. You should leave too. We don't need a burden like you in our house." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" She coldly replied, "You were only here to take care of Greg. Now that he's become independent, we don't want to live with a person of such low status anymore. Pack your things quickly and get out." She then returned to her room. Unable to comprehend her words, I contacted my husband, Robert. He calmly said, "So my mother told you, right? Actually, we had planned to have you leave once Greg was able to live on his own. I'm sorry, but this is the end of the line. Thank you for everything." And then he hung up. Distraught, I went from the top floor of our house down to the store that Robert managed on the first floor, and I confronted him. "What are you going on about? This is no joke." My voice echoed angrily through the store. Though there were no customers, the staff looked at me in shock. Robert came from the back and hurriedly took me to the back room, saying, "What are you doing? Stop this disgraceful behavior." He always liked flashy things and hated ordinary life, just like his parents. Trying to calm me, he said, "Cindy, you and I belong to different worlds. I thought you understood. Now that Greg is gone, we don't need you anymore. It's better for you to leave. Our lives are fundamentally different." I replied, "You may come from an upper-class background, but how can you treat your wife as disposable just because your child is now independent? That's not right as a human being. Our marriage was what you'd call a shotgun wedding." When we announced our marriage to Robert's parents, knowing I came from a meager background, they sighed and said, "Well, it can't be helped." They agreed to the marriage on the condition that I live with them. I moved in with them, feeling anxious, but afraid of being abandoned while pregnant. Their penthouse apartment had many rooms and a beautiful view from the balcony. When I said, "What a lovely view," my mother-in-law replied discontentedly, "We used to live in a high-rise condo before this." "That's nice. The view must have been lovely there too." "Yes, but now it's overrun with nouveau rich celebrities," she said, expressing her dissatisfaction. Based on her words, I got the feeling that they moved to a new place due to the change in their previous neighbors. However, I later learned that it was actually due to massive loans that they had left unpaid. Robert and his family have a tendency to deceive others, skillfully hiding their own failures. Robert, proud of being raised in a high-rise condo, would say, "I'm going to get an even more luxurious high-rise condo." Something beyond the reach of ordinary people. Pleasing his parents with such talk. What surprised me living with them was their complete lack of interest in typical entertainment activities. Concerts, games, and comics were all out of the question. Their enjoyment was reserved for highbrow arts like opera, orchestra, and Broadway. "That's something commoners do," they would say, and even forbade their grandson, Greg, from playing games, giving him expensive toys and encyclopedias instead. When I tried to give him common snacks, they scolded me, saying, "You shouldn't let him eat such things." As for their livelihood, they mainly relied on managing the wealth inherited from relatives, not really running any business themselves. This wealth was gradually shrinking due to the economic slump, and when Robert and I got married, their expenses had already exceeded their income, resulting in continuous debt. Robert did manage a shop, but it was a self-indulgent store that catered to his tastes, with very little actual revenue. When I started living with my mother-in-law and took over the household finances, I realized the difficult situation I had found myself in. My mother-in-law had no understanding of managing money. I even heard complaints from hired financial experts to the extent of, no matter how much we explain things to her, she just doesn't understand. She grew up in a wealthy family and married into this household without knowing the real world. The concept of running out of money was alien to her. Robert and his father shared this mindset, believing that money was always plentiful. Whenever I cautioned Robert, he would reply casually, "It's fine, we'll manage somehow." I work as a freelancer from home, and fortunately, I was able to continue this work even after giving birth. Due to their lack of common sense, ensuring the healthy development of my son, Greg, fell solely on me. The result was that my husband's family's finances became dependent on my income, a situation that has continued since we started living together. I had a strong desire to perfectly manage the household chores for the sake of my son, Greg, and despite my busy work schedule, I always made sure to complete them. Even if it meant working through the night, it was due to this that they were unaware that I was really working. His parents were under the misconception that Robert was financially comfortable, while he believed his parents were supporting the household. Thus, my mother-in-law left all the housework to me and indulged in a luxurious lifestyle, spending her days at the theater or shopping and enjoying dinner shows at night. Seeing me working at the house without makeup, she would sarcastically comment, "Shouldn't you pay a little more attention to your appearance?" It's unbelievable for a woman. When Robert's affair came to light a few years ago, she blatantly defended him, saying, "With a wife like that, no wonder he had an affair." Robert, feeling validated by his mother's support, arrogantly agreed, "Right?" and never apologized to me. My deep love for my son was the reason I endured this harsh treatment. As someone who grew up in an orphanage, I yearned to provide him with a warm home with parents, something I had always dreamed of as a child. I never imagined that my husband and mother-in-law had planned to kick me out once my son became an adult. With Greg becoming independent, however, I partially fulfilled my wish to give him a family of his own. I was initially shaken by the sudden demand from my mother-in-law and husband to leave, but then I realized that there was no point in living with those who looked down on me, treating me like a servant. If life lasts 100 years, then at only 47, I'm not even at the midpoint yet. The thought of living a joyful life for myself excites me. I will no longer need to care for my in-laws or Robert. Regaining my composure, I confronted Robert, replying, "Yes, indeed, our social classes are different." He seemed satisfied and arrogantly said, "That's right. By the way, I won't pay any alimony. Be grateful for the trouble I've taken to care for you up to now." I didn't want to be involved with them any further, and I doubted they could afford to pay me some kind of compensation. In reality, they would be at a loss without me. The thought of their foolish faces when they realized the truth made me laugh, and I found the idea of seeking compensation as trivial, responding with an "understood" Robert, as if finishing a job, readjusted his stylish hat and said with pretense, "Well then, make sure to pack your things." Robert and I successfully completed our divorce proceedings, and I moved into a new house that was conveniently close to my workplace. As I showed my appreciation and said, "Thank you for everything," my in-laws looked at me with relief, muttering, "To think we were deceived by such a woman." And well, it's easy to be thoughtless when you're young. They maintained their air of superiority until the end, looking down on me. 2 months into my new life, I received a phone call from my former mother-in-law. It was exactly the scenario I had expected. When I answered the phone, my arrogant former mother-in-law asked, "How are you doing, Cindy? Have you gotten used to living on the streets?" To which I confidently replied, "Yes, thanks to you. The high-rise condo is wonderful." "What? Didn't you hear me? Or are you going deaf? It's the high-rise condo, the high-rise condo. The high-rise condo, you say. Stop joking. Is that the name of the building or something?" "No, it's the well-known high-rise condo that you're aware of." I made it clear to her. She still didn't understand and grumbled, "How did the security of these modern high-rise condos get so lax to let someone like you in?" "No, I'm living here properly. By the way, what floor were you living on when you used to be in the high-rise condo? Why would you ask such a question?" She replied, surprised, "Just curious. Were you around the 15th floor? Don't be ridiculous. Our condo was on the 24th floor." "Oh, I see. So that's exactly half the height of the floor I'm living on now." "What, you're living on the 48th floor?" she exclaimed in shock. "Yes, I'm living freely now that I have no one that I have to look after," I answered. "Wait a minute. You didn't. Our wealth? What are you talking about? When you kicked me out, you didn't pay me a dime. Besides, you didn't have enough wealth to buy a high-rise condo," I retorted. Hearing the truth, my former mother-in-law was left speechless and fell silent. Soon after, I heard Robert's voice saying, "Hand it to me, Mom." When he took over the phone, he asked in a trembling voice, "What's this about? What do you mean you're the owner of this building?" It seemed they had just found out this fact and were in a rush to contact me. I could hear my former mother-in-law shouting in the background, "This can't be true." In reality, the building where Robert's store and the top-floor residence were located had been my property for the past 15 years. Previously, they paid rent for the apartment and the store, but as their wealth continued to dwindle, I, looking for investment opportunities, had purchased this building with the future in mind. Until now, the rent and store fees were almost free, but now that we were divorced and essentially strangers, I decided to charge them as tenants. Over the phone, Robert exclaimed, $10,000 for the store and $3,000 for rent? I can't pay that right now. No, that's the market price. What we had before was an exception. I responded. Robert, as well as my former in-laws, lacked real work experience and had been living off their family fortune, so they were ignorant about asset management and real estate. Still, you are Greg's father and grandparents. That's why I had been patient until now, I said, returning their own words back to them. I could hear Robert's heavy breathing when suddenly, my former father-in-law took the phone and shouted, "Wait a minute. Don't get ahead of yourself. How did you get so much money? It's impossible for someone to earn that much." That's when I revealed to them, "Actually, I've been hiding this, but I'm a game designer." "What? You never liked games, so I couldn't talk about it before. But actually, I'm quite well known in this industry, and I have patents, so I'm not struggling for income." The truth is, I loved games and started making my own in high school as part of the computer club because I couldn't afford to buy any software. It turned out I had a talent for it, and before getting married, I had created a popular game that became a well-known title. However, Robert, who was unfamiliar with the gaming industry, didn't know anything about this. Games. You might not know this, but the gaming industry is rapidly growing and now stands as one of America's biggest consumer content. My former father-in-law raised his voice in dissatisfaction, even saying that, It can't be that much. You must have done something illegal. Robert, we were almost tied to a criminal, he exclaimed in outrage. Frustrated by such accusations, I retorted, actually, my annual income is $3 million. I can send you the tax documents if needed. It seemed Robert and my former mother-in-law heard this, as I heard astonished voices through the phone saying, "What? $3 million? That can't be true." My former father-in-law, clearly upset, said, "Well, it seems like a thriving industry. Ordinary people's money can add up, huh?" To which I replied with a smile, "Yes, we cater to the global market, providing the best entertainment to people all over the world." In the background, I could hear Robert and my former mother-in-law arguing. "Robert, how could you not know this?" "Well, she never said anything." "Dad, hand me the phone." As my former father-in-law passed the phone, I could hear him arguing with my former mother-in-law. "Who kicked her out?" "It was you, wasn't it? Why did you do that? Are you saying it's my fault? You looked down on her too, didn't you?" Then Robert, after coughing, brazenly suggested, "Hey Cindy, let's start over. I can't think of anyone but you." I immediately replied, "There's no way that's happening," and hung up the phone. Afterward, I received numerous calls from my former in-laws, but I ignored all of them. I saved screenshots of the call history as evidence of their harassing behavior. Apparently, they had figured out where I lived and were waiting outside my high-rise condo. In the cold, as soon as they saw me, they approached me with flattery. "Cindy, long time no see. You've become even more beautiful," said my former mother-in-law, while my former father-in-law added, "I apologize for my inappropriate behavior last time." Feeling uncomfortable, I said, "Indeed. Well, I'm in a hurry," and was about to head into the mansion when they said, "Wait, Cindy. There seems to have been some misunderstandings, but we need you. We've been thinking about things deeply. And so, thinking of Greg, could we possibly get you to start over with Robert?" They said, feigning repentance. "Didn't you hear? Greg has decided to take my surname. He doesn't want to be associated with your family line." "What, really?" they exclaimed in shock. "For Greg to feel that way about us?" My in-laws said sadly, "A child can't feel good about grandparents and a father who disrespect the child's mother." I said, trying to suppress my laughter. "Greg knew about my job and has now joined a famous gaming company." Robert and my former in-laws had heard about where Greg works, but they weren't familiar with the gaming industry and thought it was just some foreign company. Since he was young, Greg had been forbidden to play games, but he secretly enjoyed playing them in my room and became deeply engrossed. Dejected to having lost their heir, the concierge of the high-rise condo noticed and approached my former in-laws, asking with suspicion, "Is there a problem here?" They left in a fluster. To avoid any further harassment, I had a lawyer compile a report with the call records and recent visits. I sent this to them with a warning letter stating, "I will report any further stalking to the police." Caring deeply about their public image, they chose not to show up again. According to real estate agents, they tried selling their furniture and other expensive items, but ultimately couldn't afford their rent. As a result, they had to move into a small one-room apartment without a bath, and that's with a waived security deposit and no required key money. I heard rumors that they are now living quietly, a stark contrast to their former arrogance. I felt relieved that they were fortunate enough to avoid ending up homeless. Now, I'm preparing for a meeting with Greg, who works at a major gaming company, to develop a new game for overseas markets. As we can talk about games endlessly once we start, we are considering living together in the high-rise condo. When I think of spending my days in this wonderful high-rise condo with its breathtaking views and passionately discussing games with my beloved son, I couldn't be happier. My name is Suzanne. I'm 45 years old. My husband is the same age as me, and we live together with his mother. I have a feeling my mother-in-law will have something to say, so I better get dinner started. Time sure flew by. Before I knew it, it was past 5 p.m. I took a short break and headed to the kitchen on the first floor. It seemed my mother-in-law hadn't come home yet. I took a moment to relax and started to think about the dinner menu. I work from home as a fashion designer, so this house also serves as my workplace. The living and dining areas are on the first floor, and the second floor houses our bedroom and my workspace. I'm home. Today was exhausting. Upon seeing me, my mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. What followed were her usual remarks. Huh, you're just starting dinner? Isn't it a bit late? I came home tired, and my son will be home soon, you know? My mother-in-law tended to nitpick about small things. Sorry, mother-in-law. While she is enjoying her retirement, I'm still working. I wish she'd understand that sometimes. Nonetheless, I tried to change the topic by asking, Mother-in-law, where did you go today? I met up with some neighbors. Apparently, they're going to attend an event at the senior citizens' home. But honestly, chatting with other elderly folks can be tiring. I see. That must have been a bit tough, I replied to her with a smile. I was saying to myself inwardly, you're an elderly yourself, aren't you? If you'd like to do something nice, maybe you can get me something sweet. How about getting a bun from the next door shop? My mother-in-law always prioritized her own feelings. She often tried to get me to do things her way. It was tiring, but I always thought of ways to handle it. If she made a fuss, I might just give her the old cake from the fridge. I spent my days with her like this. Suzanne, is this all for today's menu? She asked with a slightly surprised look. Before her were pot roast with braised vegetables, home-style chicken noodle soup, and leftover fried chicken with pickles. Well, I was a bit busy today, so I made something quick. Even if you're busy with work, you shouldn't neglect your duties as a wife. Next to me, my husband said, yeah, but this looks good enough to me. He said that happily and began to eat my cooking. There was a subtle tension at the dinner table. When I was a newlywed, I was always on edge, but I lived each day to the fullest. I'd get up early, stay up late, cook, sew, arrange flowers. I cherished each of these hobbies. As she reminisced, I was reminded of her era. Indeed, her sewing skills and her hobbies, like flower arrangements, were truly impressive. People around often said Suzanne's mother-in-law is really graceful, but they didn't know how demanding she could be at home. I've lived with her for over 20 years. When we first started our married life, my husband and I enjoyed our time together. But one day, my mother-in-law suddenly came to live with us. Her marriage wasn't going well, and she had a fallout with my father-in-law. He had a stern demeanor, and she seemed scared of him. According to my husband, his father was sometimes very hard on her and, sadly, even raised his hand against her. While he was doted on as their son, his mother was treated poorly. Then, when my father-in-law suddenly declared he was remarrying, she had to leave with nothing. Nearing 50, she seemed lost with nowhere to go. My husband and I decided to take in my mother-in-law because we were concerned about her. 20 years have passed since then, and I began to notice changes in my mother-in-law's personality. She started directing the same behavior she had once received from my father-in-law towards us. One day, when I was busy with household chores and couldn't make tea, I asked my husband to do it for me. He kindly obliged, but my mother-in-law shot me a look and asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry, my hands are full right now." "So what? You only contribute $500 in rent every month. What are you thinking?" She blurted out. Watching her make the tea herself, I thought, if you could do it yourself, you should have done it from the start. Living together like this made me realize how challenging it truly was. One day, my mother-in-law came home looking rather excited. She walked around the house with a spring in her step, humming a cheerful tune. "Mother-in-law, you seem to be in a good mood. Did something good happen? Speaking of which, Suzanne, which room do you think is bigger, the one on the first or second floor?" Her question caught me off guard. The room on the second floor has more space. If you remove the walls, you can utilize even more of it. Really? Then I shouldn't have any space issues. Wondering what she was up to, I asked her for more details. "Are you planning on starting something new?" "Actually, I'm going to start a sewing class." she said with a proud and happy expression. A sewing class. As a teacher, I was genuinely surprised. The sewing circle at the community center is ending, and a friend suggested we start a new class together. It was surprising that my nearly 70-year-old mother-in-law would be teaching. That's amazing. Sounds like fun. I responded with a bit of an exaggerated reaction. So, you're having the sewing class at the community center? No, not there, she said with a smile. Then, where will you hold it? Here, at this house. What? Are you serious? I blurted out in disbelief. That's why the second floor room seems perfect. Please tidy it up a bit. I'll have students coming over soon, so let's keep it neat. But that's where I do a lot of my work. I replied with a concerned look. Your job, right? You can use the first floor's room. I was taken aback, but that room is a bit small, and I need the flooring for my tools. She seemed to ponder a bit but eventually smiled. I'll reconsider, but I really like that room. Struggling for words, I asked, so, what should I do then? She took my hand and said, maybe you can rent an external studio for your work. I'll look into it. And with that, she headed upstairs. I watched as she began to carefully put away my tools and materials. Taking a deep breath, I mustered some courage. In that case, could I reduce the monthly rent I've been paying? She smiled warmly. Let's suggest it. But remember, we need to cooperate and support each other from now on. I reluctantly replied, understood. Then, the day of the sewing class my mother-in-law had planned arrived. The room was filled with lively voices. There were about 10 students, mostly my age, and I recognized a few faces. Suzanne, can you help me out? Please serve tea to everyone. I nodded and headed upstairs after making the tea. After distributing the tea, I remembered something and said with a smile, now, about the room's usage fee. A momentary silence followed. Usage fee? What's that about? Wait, we need to pay today? Some of the students looked at me with surprised faces. My mother-in-law seemed to be hiding a hint of anger. Actually, this room is my workspace. So, if you want to use it, I'd like to charge a bit. Renting a space this size can be quite costly. My mother-in-law silently observed the reactions of the students. It amounts to over $2,000 a month, so if we split it among everyone here today, it's about $100 per person. Is that something everyone can agree with? I waited for a response with a smile. Suzanne, you can't be serious about this, can't you? There was confusion on my mother-in-law's face. Yes, we will actually need to collect usage fees, but not from the participants today. We will also need to cover utilities and property taxes. As I continued in a gentle tone, my mother-in-law's expression softened. All right, I understand. But Suzanne, the utilities and such. I need some time to think about that. Well, if you use this room, it's only fair. I responded with a smile. The students, who had been listening to our conversation, began to murmur. Wait, was this originally Suzanne's room? Yes, it was initially my workspace. Knowing that, I might have to reconsider taking classes here. While some students looked worried, a few started to pack up to leave. What's the meaning of this? Inviting us and then doing this. One of my mother-in-law's friends, Michelle, raised her voice in frustration. Michelle, I'm sorry. This room is also Suzanne's workspace. My mother-in-law, looking frantic, called out to the departing students. Wait, please. But the sound of doors closing could be heard one after another. Michelle looked at my mother-in-law with a puzzled face. Everyone, I apologize for the surprise. But this room is really important to me. I want everyone to have a good time here, so I just ask for a bit of understanding. I tried to ease the tension, but Michelle said, next time, make sure to discuss this in advance, and with a bitter smile, she patted my mother-in-law's shoulder and left. My mother-in-law stood there for a while. I finished my tea, left the room quietly, and decided to enjoy the outdoor air. Later, at a cozy cafe bathed in soft light, I was having a good time. In front of me were Michelle and the students involved in the earlier incident. Michelle, thank you for the other day. As I expressed my heartfelt gratitude, Michelle smiled warmly. It's okay, Suzanne. but I was shocked that your mother-in-law would pull such a stunt," she said with a chuckle. "I didn't expect things to turn out this way, but now I'm really enjoying it," a student sitting next to me said shyly. That day's events were actually a plan we had secretly hatched. The truth is, Michelle is the mother-in-law of my friend, and we've always been close. She always sees right through me when I'm in trouble. That's why, with Michelle's help, we decided to execute a certain plan. One of the students, who was the only one unaware of the situation, exclaimed, "Wait, all that was planned?" I said with hopeful anticipation. "Well, I might have spiced things up a bit, but hopefully this will get my mother-in-law to be more considerate." "Suzanne, you've really surprised me by coming up with something this entertaining," Michelle said with a bright smile. The atmosphere in the cafe was warm and friendly. Michelle was quite interested in my future plans. "So, Michelle, what are you planning to do about the sewing class?" "For now, I'm planning to hold it at a different location." "I see. I can introduce you to a place I know. They're very reliable." "That's so kind of you, Suzanne. You're always so dependable." Michelle's words filled my heart with joy. After this incident, I felt our bond has deepened even more. As I sipped my fragrant tea, confident in this. When I got home, I noticed my mother-in-law seemed a bit different. "Suzanne, this is unbelievable. You embarrassed me in front of so many people. You need to apologize to everyone right now." Her eyes were furious. Taking a deep breath, I slowly took out my phone. "Sorry, I'm on the phone right now," I said, showing her the name Michelle on the screen. Her astonished face was unforgettable. "Huh? Why are you talking to Michelle?" When my surprised mother-in-law reached for my phone, my husband's voice came from the speaker. "Hey, Mom, what's this about Michelle?" She was speechless, her eyes wide with shock. Yes, I had cheekily changed my husband's contact name to Michelle just for fun. Seeing her confused expression, I couldn't help but smile. "Don't worry, it's just a little joke," I said, heading to the kitchen. After that day, my mother-in-law's attitude completely changed. She became gentler and seemed to be more cautious around me. During meals, she seemed wary, as if wondering what I might be up to next. My husband noticed the change, commenting, "Mom, you seem a bit off. Is everything okay?" I wonder why," she responded. "It might just be because she's getting older," my husband added, looking deep in thought. From then on, our home became more peaceful. I started to relax more in my daily life. Who would have thought that a simple prank could change the atmosphere at home so much? I cherish each day, enjoying each and every moment.